Good evening. I just forgot to press the go live button. It's been a while, right? 2 weeks. Good evening. Friday the 1st, 21st of May. Glad to be back. Glad to have you back. We're going to talk about a classic tonight and e-pianos and all that stuff. Am I really live now? Should be. How are you? Usual levels question. Quite crowded in the chat already. Nice. Very nice. So, how did that happen? Guy Scott asked me on Patreon if I could shed some light on the old Maid Street classic Round 2 by Moritz von Oswald and Mark Ernestus. And I first thought, yeah, sure, how hard can it be? And then I figured out, wait, there are some e-pianos involved. And that's always nasty. And it has proven true. And I'd also like to explore why, for one, e-pianos are totally fantastic and I love them. And why it's so nasty to recreate something that is a road sound and all that stuff. So, first off, good evening, dear chat. Hello, Craig, Veiko Pach, Elohim, JCO is back. I saw Stefan, Isa, hello, Thomas, Mundulator, hey. Hello, welcome back, Danilo. Sienna is back as well. Hey, hello, Gustav and Shadowless. Just in case that your name is Moritz von Oswald or Mark Ernestus and you're watching this at some point in the future, I hope I do your idea of music production and approach justice by getting really anally retentive about details and taking time. And I do this with the greatest due respect. This is not meant to be mockery. Also, what I did not try to achieve with this is recreating the track from A to Z, fully. This isn't about mixing, this is about the sound space and synth programming and sound design, just to be sure, in case anyone is saying, it sounds different. Yes, it does, I know. I'm well aware of that. Hello, Rune. The stream has started. Hello, Adrian. I hope the stream itself isn't glitching, even though YouTube is giving me some message again. But yeah, hello, Pendrick. What else? So, I made clear. Also, if you want to listen to the tracks, you can obviously find them on YouTube. They are here. There are two versions, the dub and the vocal, and I looked at both in sequence. And I already made a short video for my Patreons to talk about how I went about the listening process. And right now the loungy stuff is getting mildly confusing. Let me adjust my levels on this end for a second. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. So, high monotone in short terms, how did I go about that? I listened to both tracks very carefully and looked for pointers to what the heck Moritz and Mark were up to, and trying to find out how things were layered. And I already made some assumptions about what they have done, and at that point I already had the impression I forgot something, and I obviously did. There is a lot of tiny layering stuff going on, and we'll look at that in a minute. But if you want to sit down and for the purpose of learning something about synthesis and sound design and programming and sequencing, I really suggest trying that and try to explain to yourself what you are listening to, which sounds, and try to analyze that, not just from feeling of gut, but also by looking at sequences. Take a short snippet, for example, in the dub, there is something about around 3 minutes where you can look at the individual layers and how sounds really come together quite well. And it's these interesting pointers that allow me to try some things, and it's a lot of trial and error really, and to get close to a result, a potential result. But I found this one to be very interesting again, and I do these challenges, or I challenge myself with that because it's interesting. It's a set goal. I want to go into this direction, and it challenges me to see if my assumptions are correct. So I have a number of hypotheses, and this is a way of verifying them really quickly. So, and eventually half of them are wrong, and then I have to take a different route. I need to disable the phone. And it's a very interesting process to me, and I like doing that. Hello, Fuzzy Logic. So, shall we disengage the elevator? Yeah, let's jump right in. And I'd also like to make sure I don't want to play the originals on the stream, because I'm interested if I'm able to trigger a copyright claim with what I came up with. So it's also an interesting experiment, isn't it? So let's see, where are the last notes? Oh, it's coming to an end. Shadowless. Let's take a moment to listen to this good loungy piano sound. Dum dum. No, I haven't listened to the new Heaven Chord EP yet. He wanted to get in touch with me and didn't. Did you change your name? Is that you? So, come on. No, stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Okay, let's get serious then, shall we? I just started. And give me a little bit more levels again. So, if you listen to the link and the dub version, you will instantly acknowledge that my e-piano isn't close. It's somewhat close, but it's not accurate. Apart from that, We've got some beats. It's boring, just standard material. I don't think that's too interesting. Let's disable that for a second. And also, let's disable the piano for a second and just look at these sounds here. Let's stop. Yeah, let's do this. So what I took away from this snippet around 3 minutes in the dub is I need a sine bass, obviously, and there is this kind of fatty classic bass sound that sounds a little bit like lately bass, but it's not. And then there is this rashy thing on top, and they play along really well. And it's actually not that complicated. I mean, you have the sine bass, it's just a sine bass, nothing too particular about that. This sound here, and is the level all right? It should be okay, I hope so. I tried a number of things. I also fired up some Yamaha DX thing and went through some presets just because I had the impression I know this type of sound somewhere and it should be a square type bass, but no. And I eventually ended up, god damn it, using the free, and I really like this thing, you hear Tyrell No6, because it has a very nice and beefy low end. And I'm sorry, no, it's not Corona, it's just a frog. And I first thought, it should be square type thingy, but it's not really. It's not. It's somewhere between triangle and saw, and a little bit of sub. What is specific to this sound, and you can also hear that in the original, is there is a little bit of sustain going on. I first started recreating this sound with just a very snappy envelope on the filter, and it didn't really work out. And I found that it's this that really made the difference. There is some sustain going on, and you can still hear stuff, but not too much. And that's one of the details that, if you find a sound that you really like, these tiny things, they make such a big difference. It's not much. It's just the stupid sustain. It's not a fancy filter or anything. It's just the tiny amount you get after the attack that still stands somewhere. And that's just punchy, too much, and it's somewhere there. So very often it's the details in the envelopes. And to get this very harsh presence in the high end, I ran it through an amp, because I guess if I think I want, it's the 90s, I'm sitting in a studio, I'm having some kind of sound coming from a synthesizer, and you hear these clicks and these overpronounced things in the track. How do you get it done? And I guess the fastest route to that is take a pedal and crank up the presence, which I did here. Let's just give you the comparison. Presence full on without. and it's a little bit nasty. And also what I found in the track is that very often with the classical dub techno stuff, there's some harsh EQing going on. Probably just, if I imagine having a 4 bands parametric EQ, how would I do that? Just radically throw out something in the midst. That's what I did here, and it actually worked. Also, I inserted the EQ3 to give it this phasey FIR sound. Listen to that. Without. It's just this tiny little bit of extra punch. Saturator, just to ease out the harshness, and eat a little bit away from the peaks before going into a limiter who's even cutting more away from that. Let me reduce these things, and right now I'm losing level, but that's way too little. Sorry. No, I need that. So these are specific ITB measures to ease the nastiness of the transient just a little bit. Hey, Stereo Jack. Hey, Joey Dendron. And in the end, I also ran it through Air Windows tape to just round it off a little bit more, soften the thing just a touch. And then there's already the next sound, which is just this nasty thing on top, and I think that isn't really well EQ'd or actually too close to the real thing, but it does the job. And what it is also a very simple little thing, instance of analog with just a simple saw played at, I think, some lower registers for rash. Also amped. Let me disable that real quick. And that's still the obvious sound, I think. That's what you can expect, but it gets interesting. Once again, amp, treble, presence cranked up. Need saturation again, because this is just a little bit too much. Just to give it a little bit more ease. EQ, I don't know what the heck. And then I went also for a chorus because, let me disable that. No, that's not the sound. That's much more like it. And by the way, this is a free, really nice chorus. I have some trouble with finding good sounding choruses, and Azurite, it does exist as 64-bit thing. Do check it out. I will also include the link in the description again. Really liking this one. It doesn't really model anything, and then it just goes into an echo. With a very short delay time. And that's it. It's not synced to any clock. I dialed that in by hand because I find that very often in these old tracks, the delays aren't obviously synced to any clock. In a hardware context, if you imagine sitting in a studio and you have a little delay box or a space echo or something, there is no host to clock. So I dial that in until it kind of felt right to me. And it also goes through an instance of to tape just to soften it a little bit. It's really subtle. What's interesting, again, about the sequencing the guys did back then is how the sine bass interacts with the other sounds. When I first looked at this short snippet, I had some trouble figuring out what exactly I was listening to. When I started making this sound with Tyrell, I first thought it should have more punch into the low end, and let's look at that for a second. It's not too much low end. There is some action, but what really adds to that is the overlapping with the sine every now and then. And that's what you find very often in these old tracks. And if you think about when did you program your bass sounds like that the last time? I don't do that. I usually have a bass sound and that's it. And I really like this idea. Back then, we didn't have the analyzers and all these super clinical tools to look at sound and put them under a microscope and see which frequencies overlap and how to avoid that. So there is some kind of masking going on. And that is something I took out of this again, a reminder that too much cutting makes sound very, very clinical. If you listen to some of my tracks on SoundCloud, like, I don't know, there is this dub techno thingy with a moon. It is very, very clean produced, and that comes from harshly separating sounds and preventing masking too much. And I'm totally guilty of doing that. If you want your tracks to sound rich and full and more like a 90s edge, then fuck them. Let things mask. That's good. It's actually good. And also how things then overlap over time is really interesting. So my balances it's not perfectly right here. And the EQing is different, and I could have spent more time making this more coherent. And then things start to blend and blur much more into each other. Also, we don't have any noise right now, which also adds to that impression. But these are some things I really took away. Create a sequencing context for more than just one bass sound. That's what this track is all about. It's not, my idea isn't like going and just copying that, but I think there's a lot of things to be learned and taken out of old productions, and today it's just Moritz and Mark. So it's good fun, and it's not obvious. It really becomes obvious if you start recreating that and try to do the thing again, and then it becomes obvious what you usually do and which other ways you could approach things, and that to me is very valuable. So let's listen to everything in context again. Let me check the chat really quick. Rune asks, how do you know how to order the plugins? That's something I still don't understand. Yeah, JCO is already providing the answer. Depending on what they do, and the order is not that important, but often it is. Rune, I wouldn't be dogmatic about anything. There are occasions in which certain order makes sense. For example, EQ before compression can be very useful depending on what you EQ, and it always depends. And these are the choices we have to learn and test. It's really about testing. That's what I can encourage you to do, is try different things. The next time you wonder, should I stick the EQ in front of the compressor or behind that? Try both and really zoom in on the details and the changes, because it varies a lot. If you remove, for example, the very low end before you're hitting strong compression ratio, it will make a huge difference. And the sound will be very different than what you get if you did that cut after the compressor. And then it's a matter of choosing what you like more. If you, for example, have some delays or reverbs on a track and wonder, should I put them before or after the compressor? So also, what do you want to achieve? Do you want the dry sound duck in the reverb and delay a little bit or not? So, and then it's really about trying stuff. That can't be an answer, really. Yeah, Elohim says, I think it's also just a matter of experimenting with the different effect chains or the order of those, and it is. Stefan asks, why do you want to compress something you want to cut? So compression is not only changing the amplitude of the sound, but also the relationship of the frequency range. If you have a very full spectrum of a signal and you remove a little bit of bass, you create a very different compression result because the compressor is less reactive to bass. If you want to pronounce the bass some more without boosting that, it can make sense to, for example, cut the mid-range a little bit before going into compression, if that's what you're after. So it makes a difference. It can also make perfect sense to cut something, then compress it, and then boost something in a different frequency range again, because depending on the compressor, they all have these different types and ways of interacting with the full spectrum. And if that's what you want and that's what you achieve by making a certain cut or boost beforehand, and you need to mitigate that because you have gotten this amount of density and space. For example, if you're compressing something that has some reverb on it and you compress with a lot of ratio, it brings up the reverb, so the space becomes more dense. It's totally fair to say, no, right now I feel the space feels cohesive in the way I want it to sound, but now my 4K is just out of hand or too loud, or I need to cut or boost the high end. So, hello Nicholas. So, yeah, let's move on to the obnoxious piano. And my Discord knows how much I've been pulling my hair out about that. Really drove me insane. Like I said, I wasn't able to get exactly that specific chord right. And this is about the chord. Let's zoom in to that for a second. And let's boost that a little bit. So, what do we have here? And I made some different choices. I tried a lot. And eventually I thought, fuck it. Ableton has the electric in the suit. Let's try to use that. I think it does a really good job at sounding like an e-piano. And I really struggled with finding the chord balance. This is what it looks right now. I couldn't name it. And let me quickly check something. So, just to give you an idea why e-piano type sounds are so tricky. If you ever sat in front of a Rhodes and just played that, it's so responsive and dynamic. The hammer affects so many things. If I start just introducing a little bit of velocity randomization, the chord would change quite drastically. And that's totally amazing. It's just a nightmare to reprogram because it's not just about finding the corresponding notes, but also the timing of the notes makes a difference. If you have a sloppily played key and the timing is a little bit off, and then you have a stronger pronounced note on top, the chord really changes a lot, like you can hear right now. This is just the variation you get by randomizing this. On the other hand, if you don't want to recreate something, but you want to create a nice moving chord, that's an easy way to go. And I mean, and I played around with note lengths, and let's just let's change some stuff here. Let's make so, and it's not a radical change I'm making here. I mean, look at this spot. It's just a lovely instrument. And also the variation you can get out of this is pretty nice. And another nifty detail I noticed by listening really closely to the original is I spotted another layer, and let's dial this down for a second, maybe. So that is just the piano. And here is a little tiny something. It doesn't do much, and I wonder if in the actual track they used a delay with diffusion that played just before the notes. So check out the timing here. That's an interesting thing. These notes are quantized, and these are a little bit pre-played to ease off the attack, to make it a little bit softer and smoother. It's just a tiny little detail, and I don't know if that's what they've done there, but then again, I think they did. And I will get to that when we look at the remake of the vocal version, how I come to this conclusion. So there was a question. Joey Dendron asked, is Ableton Electric sampled or generated? It's synthesized, I think. You can change all these parameters. So, it's not. So, and I tried a number of things as well. Obviously, I went firsthand to create my own e-piano patch with wavetable, which works okay-ish, but has a very different flavor and it sounds a little bit more stiff. Then I also tried Lounge Lizard, which has a very different kind of sound to it, which I like as well. And by the way, this is just the session. You can sometimes get this for just a few bucks, or as a gift on top if you buy anything on Plugin Boutique. They often give this away for free, and that's how I got it. And I think it's great value. It does one thing, and that is a Rhodes. And I figured out by playing around with that this is actually great fun to modulate as well. That's good fun. Anyway, in the end, I went for the EP and this tiny little layer thing on top. And maybe one word about the delay here. And that is something, thank you, Stefan. You put my nose to that by saying, these, I don't know how you pronounce it, these racing delays, and remind me to use more delays in a row again. So that's just the echo playing along, and it wouldn't be as interesting without another delay in front of that, which is just doing this tiny little thing. Nifty detail. And also these delay times I just set by hand. And that's something I tend to forget myself, how much fun it is to play around with strange delay times that you just dial in until it feels good. Very often I just go for something synced and then I keep it there, or then I just edit the time a little, disengage the sync. and just make this tiny variation. But the results I'm getting when I just disengage the sync and tune in the times, that's much more valuable and fun. I mean, let's check out what we can find here. And that's another interesting thing. This isn't really far away from that, but it creates another bump in the road. Yeah, it's groovy. It is groovy. So, any questions? So, and when I somehow I thought like, this is somewhat close enough. It has the groove and the feel is in the right direction. Said like, if I take the same sounds now and just change the sequences to the stuff from the vocal, how does that sound like? And then I started adding a few more things, and here we are. And they don't work anymore. And what becomes clear, and that's what I find interesting or wonder, is which version came first. I would guess the vocal. But then it's interesting how different the choices would have been, because I mean, in the vocal mix, they, for example, had to, I think it featured less of the Reshi thing here. The delay was very, very reduced. The sound pulled down probably. And this is also not super accurately sequenced right now. I made mistakes and I'm aware of that. Also, sign needs to be lower. And one addition, which is why I reasoned they used this sound here. Just let's go back for a second. How I concluded that this, something like that, maybe in a different octave range, was present is I found a pointer in the origin, in the vocal mix, and that is this one here. Let's listen to that. If you listen closely to the start of the vocal, you can hear that on this sound you have some tiny pad sitting on top, some really small It's really subtle. And it makes a huge difference. As tiny as it is, it has a much bigger emotional value with just this tiny thing on top. I think that is just it's some tiny redominator patch that I also used for these. It's, I think, actually a patch I made for Redominator when we released that. It's a classic 90s pad sound, very similar to the one you also hear on Rise From Your Grave, I think. Just always works so easy. And yeah, it's also interesting which difference just the hi-hat makes. In the dub version, it's a very short one. Maybe this is a little bit too short, and I also added a little bit more resh, I thought. Yeah. Instant tape fake trick, by the way, for creating reshy hats. But I like the tempo this creates, and it also becomes very obvious if you compare the tracks. It's just a very good reminder that all these details are much more important than adding another layer of something. Yeah, details. God is in the Details. Anything going on in the chat? Did I forget anything? So there isn't that much really, but it's details. It's worshipping the amount of effort anyone puts into these tiny little decisions. And maybe you know that this track is missing something, I need another synth, I need another something. And yeah, eventually what the track needs is this tiny thing in the background, or this little bit of delay on top. That much. Or this little bit too much transient in the high end. Or an occasional sine bass, and this is what I totally got wrong. There is much more going on in that area in the original. But it's just a very good reminder that less is more. And thinking more about what we put into our music and how we present that. Another something that again made a big difference. Let's restrict the stereo with some more of the pad. So full stereo, and if you have headphones on right now, this might be feasible. I don't think it translates too well on MacBook speakers, for example. Right now, out of the box, the sound is too wide. It falls off the realm and space of the track, and just restricting that a little bit. And let me enable and disable that a few times. It's really subtle. It's 12% less width. Off, on. Tiny change, much more coherent space. And yeah, it just continues. The tiny stuff is good. It really matters a lot. And yeah, I guess that is almost everything I can say about this. So it's up to you. Check. Stefan says, as was mentioned before, I wonder if these details were artifacts from the limits of production. Yeah. And that is something I would really like to talk about with Mark Ernestus and Moritz von Oswald sometime. Some nerd talk about experimenting and trying things and arriving at conclusions, and how these came to be, if they set themselves limitations, or if they had limited hardware, or they wanted to convey what was the starting point and what happened then. It would be a very interesting conversation to have. Nicholas, can we look more closer to this little thing in the bass section? Let me check again. This one? Or this one? I guess the request came at the time when I was talking about that. And in case that's it, it's basically the same pad sound, just played very shortly. And also the chord isn't accurate. Neither is the EQing, but yeah, that's a little bit mood. The next one, you meant this one. Okay. Nicholas, what specifically do you wish to know about that? Maybe you haven't been around. I deconstructed the sound at the beginning. It's really just a simple saw patch played at a very low register. In this case, it's even a chord. Why is it a chord? In this track, it's not. And you can hear why. This is more rashy and refined, and the more notes you play, the less raw and defined the sound becomes. Well, in this case, it's just a shitty saturation right now, which make this appear much more unpleasant, and this amp as well. but and it sounds like a fart in the desert unless you treat it interestingly. And so simple, stupid, simple sound. Just play a short note, low octave, then crank up the highs. And this is also what you find on a lot of deep chord records very often, and in a lot of other productions from the 90s. I think they had excessive use of pedals. That's my guess, really. I hope that answered your question. I mean, in the end, I can only guess, and I can try to imagine what does the studio look like and how would I achieve that. It's probably a combination of maybe a pedal and cranking up the high frequencies on the console, and maybe just overdriving the gain depending on the board. I think there was some weird console, I don't know which type of clipping that thing had, if that was a diode clipper or something. Probably sounds less rashy, so I would say pedal, or maybe running the signal through various tracks on the console and cranking up the highs on every instance. I wouldn't be surprised if they did something like that as well with individual channels, just rerouting them back into the next channel to give even more of boost to certain areas. Could actually make sense. So, JCO agrees that the pad was too wide without the stereo width restriction. Yeah, Stefan, I heard the UVK Happy Funtime Power podcast as well. Not power. So Stefan says, I was recently reading about penning and doors, and they were discussing how modern day penning is totally unrealistic. And yes, it is. That's also, I share the sentiment that penning like this is not really precise. It feels different, and there are different interpretations of the penning law as well. And yeah, also they were also ranting about how Greg Scott wants a gain knob at any point, and yes, please. And that's nothing specific to Ableton. It's Logic and Cubase, and they all share the same lack of thought for gain staging. So there was a question about dropping the Ableton file. Monotone, can you drop the Ableton file somewhere? Yes, I will do that tomorrow. You will need a few things though, but it will be in the descriptions. Maybe I should reconsider some copyright stuff beforehand. Like I said, my intention here is to stick into a modus operandi, and this is not, please don't take this and just use it and make a track that's almost exactly the same with 2 notes. I couldn't sleep. If you're watching this and enjoying this, if I upload the file, don't do that. Thank you very much, Shadowless. So, yeah, Elohim, there are good reasons why IDB sounds like IDB, and yes, there are. And once again, just to overcome the ails of summing, this exists in my chain again, just to give it a little bit more roundness. And I really want to spend more time fiddling around with the Air Windows consoles soon. What I really want is what is it Studio One does in every DAW with these analog summing features. That would be really good. Oh boy. Also like just and that is really, yeah, I guess they have Rhodes in their studio. Yeah, that's so much more fun with the pad. Stefan is thinking about grabbing Mixbus. I've been thinking about the same, and it's just a workflow question. But I definitely want to demo that as well sometime. Yeah. It's quite fascinating. You know, if you're watching this and this is the first stream of mine you're watching, I feel like I have said everything and explored this within 60 minutes, and I usually need 90 minutes to 2.5 hours for that. So it's kind of a novel experience. Hello, Sadek. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm almost done, unless you have some interesting questions, or maybe. So, okay, one thing. And once again, I've been doing this sort of analyzing stuff for over 20 years right now. Like really sitting down, listening, deconstructing, trying to recreate things I heard, and failing and trying again. And it was my learning process to get somewhere, to have a goal to reach and to move forward to that and understand sound in a way that I was able to recreate about anything I heard at some point, or up to a point when things became obvious. This may look very easy, and I lately watched a YouTube tutorial about how you can learn to create about every sound, but it didn't go into the details. And if you want to achieve that, sit down and take any sound you find and try to recreate that as good as you can. And I assure you, you will learn a number of things about synthesis and internalize how things work if you pay attention to what you do. If you think about how to use an envelope, how to blend waveforms, how to use effects to create a certain kind of space. If you have some kind of trouble creating cohesive space or some impression of space or mood, try narrowing down the width a little bit and these tiny things, and pay attention to the tiny things. That is really the only thing to acquire these things. Learning to listen and asking oneself questions about what one's hearing, and then trying to find ways to manifest that in sound. And I also assure you that you can do 75% of all sounds that are not an e-piano or a 303 with almost any plugin out there. They are different in terms of interface and the number of presets, but you do not need to buy the latest fancy shit for anything you hear in techno music. You can get that done in thousands of ways. There is no need of buying a plugin. Buying a plugin very often is a shortcut to the specific sound, because you get a preset or a range of presets or something that's close. And I have the impression that you guys who are looking this want to be able to recreate your own sound, and this only goes by learning the rules and at some point being able to break them and use things in creative other ways. Like, what happens if I take this tiny saw sound and play it an octave down? This takes a lot of exploration and trying out things, and it took me a lot of time to get there, and it was great fun. I can only encourage you to do that. And fuck making finished tracks, how about using half of your time studying sound design and synthesizer programming and trying to find more interesting sounds in the plugins you already have, and by combining things in different ways. What are you always doing? Do the opposite. What have you never tried? Try that. Stuff like that. It's really key to learning all this. A lot of contribution. Yeah, Sadek, sorry, but it will be available. Sadek regrets coming late. So, and yeah, just because I'm reading Moritz von Oswald again, this is not meant to be an insult, and I do not intend to say I know what you've been doing. I'm curious, and I'm trying to Sherlock my way through your proposition of great art. Not because I want to copy that, but because I think your approach to creating something unique is something that resonates a lot with me, and that is what I'm trying to communicate with my streams, really. In the end, this is not about sound design, this is about exploring something, and I'm still not sure what that is. So, guys, Elohim asks, but we need more plugins. No, for what? I don't need more plugins. I have enough. I have more than I need. I need to clean up, actually. If I didn't have some super secret beta source installed right now, we could have a look at my plugin folder. But I can assure you, yes, there are quite a number of things, but I'm trying to find a reason to keep stuff. And I really like testing things, but I also try to remind myself to see if I really need something. And especially with saturation and compression, there is so much. There is a new saturation plugin every day and a new compression plugin every day. And can I need that? No, they take so much time getting to know, especially compression. Oh Christ. If you think about buying 10 new compressors, how about taking the 3 you have and really learn them? That will occupy you for around a year, I guess, in my experience. Getting to know compressor is that's kind of a journey. Hello Neosolute. And I will switch to this right now. So say no to gas. Hello Shavan. Shavan. By the way, and I'm really proud about this one. And I will also give you the patches for these. And this is actually a wavetable patch, because I sat in some session and said, like, I know that making an e-piano and wavetable should be totally easy. I've been there already and it was totally easy, and then I forgot about it again. And if you want an e-piano from wavetable, the sub is it. It's just the sub with a little bit of clever modulation, and the modulation is an envelope to the tone and I think velocity to time. No, to the genau. Velocity is modulating the decay time. Depending on how hard you hit it, the hammer stays open longer. Is it the hammer? I don't know. But there you are, e-piano, and then you can add a little bit of crap on top. Was this some string strangeness underneath? But there you are. Wavetable has a e-piano type sound built in. Yes, this needs more 70s organ drum machine. True. Maybe we should make a lousy organ music session sometime. Yeah, but I think this concludes today's stream. I have nothing else to share about this project. If you would like to get some behind the scenes stuff, join my Patreon and get some early information, or watch me pull my hair about stuff, or ranting about learning things, or I don't know, planning some listening sessions soon and further things, so stay tuned. Or join the Discord. I heard there are some cool people, most of which are here. Hello, Herbie. Sorry, what? Herbie Firstink. Oh yes, a acid house session would also be good and interesting. That was a quick stream. Could you maybe ramble about the intricacies of the 303 for another hour? Oh. Hello, Alex. Yeah, let's. How about a acid house track next? Monotone. You find the Discord in the description below. JCO is asking what's the right way to distort a 303. The correct answer is don't. You don't distort a 303. Maybe this much. I'm a purist. I don't distort 303s. Boss Blue Driver. Interesting. I actually like this Fahrstuhlmusik. Yeah, what else can we talk about? How are you guys doing in isolation? I have to admit, it's been a rough 2 weeks. I don't want to whine about it, but I realize I lack a certain kind of stimuli, cultural input, and I need to be more aware of creating breaks in my day. I started isolation with either preparing a streaming or post-production of a stream for the first, 4 weeks or something, and I noticed that's not a pace I can possibly sustain. So that's why my frequency in streaming changed a little bit down. By the way, I played a set in Second Life last week, and you can find the link somewhere, and I will do that more often again because it's really funny. And I also, maybe I will do some streaming tonight on Twitch, DJing maybe, and also DJ streams. I want to do DJ streams. Yeah, Craig, a lesson on processing 303s can do. I would, quick tip, grab 1176 and compress with that really hard. It's good. It's good fun. Yes, 1176 is a fat. No, Stefan, I'm not a pianist. This is pure luck. I'm playing the same keys. Let's check out something. I mean, this is really funny. Yes. Let's stop. I mean, who's still watching this? JCO suggested snipping. Seriously, I knew this wasn't probably going to be 2 hours today. So, and I wonder what I have forgotten to talk about. But it's not really that much, and I hope I can only repeat myself now. Details are good. Give yourself Mühe. Try hard. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. If you pitch bend the E piano, it sounds Blade Runner. Don't do it. And more pitch bends. That's something I keep forgetting. This is so synthwave and 80s pitch bend. And Detroit techno as well, fast pitch bends, icon, these strings. I also want to do a 90s techno session. Mundulator requested that. There is probably just a repetition of what I already said in other streams, but in a much more condensed format. If, maybe this is good to fall asleep to. I could read you some book. Cake and do some ASMR eating. Wenn einem so viel Gutes widerfährt, das ist schon ein Asbach uralt wert. Yes, that's it. I conclude the stream. For real, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm thinking about a regular schedule from now on, which I still have to decide upon. Why did I start eating? Stay tuned. And I'm also putting more stuff into the community section on the YouTube right now. I discovered that now that I crossed 1,000 subscribers, I can actually use that in different ways. And I will. So subscribe and stay tuned for things to come, and say hi on the Discord, and send me all your money and become a Patreon, and above all, stay healthy and sane, and stick to your home place. That's also valuable and good and important. To me it is. So stay tuned and have a very good night and a lovely weekend, and see you around next time when we talk about synthesizers, cat food, compression, phasers, samples, doing stuff wrong, easy, simple, and shit like that. So, with that said, bye.